Hi, everybody. Welcome into Chris and Company. I want to go with a nice warm intro for you with very earthy tones here to start Chris and Company. This is going to be a very fun show. We're having Scott Bentley on today. We're going to have another Tigers season preview at some point, but this is definitely for Tiger fans, something that you're going to want to listen to. I mean, it's a full breakdown of the offense, of the defense, of the pitching, of the division. I think you guys are going to like this quite a bit. I've known Scott for a very long time. I would say let me think about this, because I met Scott before I met Anthony Broom. And the reason I bring that up is because I think of all the guests we've had, I think I've known him the longest. I'd have to sift back through the Rolodex of shows that we've done, but that's a special honor. He has the privilege of knowing me. Ugh. But he hosts Locked On Tigers, and he co-hosts Locked On Red Wings. I used to do Locked On Tigers. He took over and has taken it to new heights. So really looking forward to talking to him, breaking down some baseball stuff. Before we get to that, though, just a few programming notes. Everything Chris Castellani related, you can find at CastellaniContent.com. You can find all our podcasts. You can find the post-game videos. Just want to make a note to the people watching on YouTube. By the way, if you are watching on YouTube, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Monday's episode of I'll Say This was the most viewed episode since we revamped the show with me and Austin, which was the beginning of football season last September. So thank you. I was, look, being proud of the product is one thing. Having eyeballs on it is another. I was very happy with that show, and I appreciate the response and reception to it. Hey, you want to get people going, talk about the Michigan State rivalry, or Michigan-Ohio State, or any rivalry. Shit, Globo Jim versus Average Joe is probably get about 500 views. So, all right, go there. I appreciate all the support. Follow me on Twitter at Castellani2014. And let's just jump right into our interview with Scott Bentley. All right, we had about 10, 15 minutes of conversation that I'm glad I didn't record, but it was very fun to talk about before we jumped into the podcast here. Scott Bentley, friend, host of Locked On Tigers, joins the program here after a Tigers ball game against the Atlanta Braves in spring training. What's going on, buddy?
Man, I'm happy to be here. I feel a little bit of imposter syndrome. Like you have Malloy on and Tarek Skubal on, and then it's oh, we're gonna bring on Scott Bentley. I don't really know if I'm up to snuff with the rest of the hosts, but I'm glad to talk Tigers ball, man, and glad to catch up with you, like you said.
I'm lucky in terms of my variance because, I can just throw my fastball out there, which is reaching out to as many Tigers people as I can. And then it's who in media do I know? And so I've been, once it gets past Tigers, it's kind of harder to get anybody else, at least from the teams on. But no, I mean, we're happy to do it. We're getting closer to opening day. And we're at a point now. I'm glad I'm having you on now because we're at a point where there's a lot of spring training storylines that are in full swing. First question, who's Jahmai Jones and why is he the greatest player in the history of baseball? I'll take it one step back and get a little bit more serious. Is he making the team?
So right now, I genuinely think a lot of that relies on Parker Meadows. If Meadows is healthy, then I think that there's a real chance that they work out and try to convince Jahmai to just be the AAA depth guy. And the second another outfielder goes down, have fun, you're getting the call up. But if Parker's injury continues progressing how it has, which is slowly, and obviously Vierling is missing opening day, I think he becomes a lock. Legitimately, I think if Meadows isn't ready by opening day, this dude is essentially guaranteed. Not only can he play center, I mean, he's not going to win a Gold Glove out there. He's a righty that mashes lefties. That is exactly what this team was looking for in some capacity this offseason too. And obviously he's not going to have a 1200 OPS this year, but golly, I mean. You get a nice righty bat that can do some damage against lefties and play center field. I really think if Parker isn't ready, that he's as much of a lock as anybody else.
Yeah, and that's important. It's best case scenario, Parker's just healthy, ready to go in center field. But beyond that, there's a couple things I like about it. One, I I can't have Ryan Kreidler in center in a regular
Yeah.
season. Yeah, I can't. Give me roll the dice with Jones a million times. That's kind of the big. The other thing that I think is something that Scott Harris maybe doesn't get enough credit for is the fact that I feel like his scrap heap pieces, it's been better with pitching, but even with position players has been pretty solid. Like, say what you will about guys like Ibanez or McKinstry, but they fill roles on this team. And I feel like a guy like Jahmai Jones potentially could have a piece like that. Do you feel like outfield depth is probably one of the big concerns like with this team right now, even before the Meadows injury?
Yeah, it's interesting. So that is honestly even more of the reason why I wanted Bregman than just getting Bregman. Like,
right.
I wanted the ability to have Matt Vierling be the super utility, play a lot of outfield, be that right-handed corner outfield bat that they really, kind of need right now in a sea of lefty outfielders, right? They kind of need that righty, and that would have allowed that to happen. So I don't disagree with that. I think it's interesting because they have like some outfield prospects that I'm genuinely excited about, even aside from just like the big names, like Clark, obviously, but like they have guys, but it because this regime is so keen on bringing in and targeting amateur prospects that are out of high school, and being more active in international free agency and whatever, like all of the outfield depth that they presumably have in the future is all still in the lower levels of the minor leagues. And so they don't have anyone like waiting in the wings. There's not anybody that's like, oh, if shit hits the fan, I'm going to give, Toledo a call and call up so-and-so. Like that's kind of absent. So I do agree that, especially with an outfield that is extremely injury prone. Kerry Carpenter has not played a full season yet. Riley Green just kind of barely played a full season, still went on the IL for a long period of time last year. And Parker Meadows is hurt right now, and Matt Vierling is hurt right now. Like there is no guarantee that Wenzel Perez is hurt right now. There's no guarantee that this outfield, stays healthy all year. And I think not having that depth, especially right-handed hitting depth, kind of waiting in the wings, could absolutely rear its head for sure.
And that fucking, if you want to go down the line, fucking Badu's had been injured too. I mean, we've had so many. Yeah, that's right. When you lay it out like that, that is concerning. And it's one of those things that I think a year from now, this issue probably won't exist because all these younger prospects are going to be a year older and they're all going to be closer to AAA or closer to the big league level. I think it's more so just a timing thing. I was going to talk about this later, but you mentioned the Bregman a second ago and that entire saga. And we've kind of moved on from it. I guess my takeaway from the entire ordeal was that they gave him what I viewed as a very competitive offer. He turned it down. There's been obviously think pieces I've talked about, is it the park? What are the reasons behind it? He ends up getting the big deal from Boston. But I came away from it more optimistic about the future than I expected to be, because I felt like they put their best foot forward in free agency and he simply just said no. Did you come away from it inspired and feeling like, okay, yeah, maybe Bregman said no, but in the future, somebody will say yes and that Illich isn't going to be afraid to spend?
Yeah, I think that's kind of a shared sentiment for sure. Just the sheer fact that they were willing to put their money where their mouth was for the first time in maybe the Chris Illich era. I mean, I guess, like Javi, that like
the opt-outs make it.
I completely agree. And that's something that obviously, I mean, it sounds like was one of the big difference makers for him not coming to Detroit was those opt-outs. That was a report. I know Petzold reported that at one point, but just like the structure of the contract is odd, because I find myself thinking, you know what? I think Bregman took the right deal. I think he has more control and still is getting paid a shitload with the deal he took in Boston. And I think that is a more player-friendly deal. I genuinely do, still to this day. I did in the moment, I do now. But the thing that makes me play devil's advocate with myself there is all offseason we heard about how Bregman wanted that long-term security, right? That was all like he wants Bregman's looking for a long-term deal. He wants to have this be the last time he's in free agency, whatever. And clearly that wasn't true, which is fine. But it's this weird, I don't know. It's just this weird dichotomy where it's like, I think he honestly took the better deal, opt out every year and $40 million a year. You shit. Right. Yeah, dude, like that, he would be an idiot not to take that still. But if then, like, let's be honest about the fact that long-term security was never his number one priority then, because if it was, the Tigers deal was very competitive.
Yeah, and it's, I think perception of those things changes even from the beginning of the free agency period to the end of it, because especially when Boris is your agent, like the problem, and look, as long as Boris has a client like Juan Soto who's making the money he's making, like he's going to continue to get big time names. But I think the downside is, like, if you are a top 5 to 10 player in the sport, Boris is the perfect agent for you, because you will 100%. You will get the deal that you deserve, that is warranted. But he wants all of his clients to get paid as if they're top 10 players in baseball. And Bregman's wonderful. But I would say even now, when I look at what the Tigers offered, like, he's, in terms of AAV, like the 3rd highest paid player in baseball this year? Like, it's crazy. And so I look at the offer, I came away from it kind of feeling like it ended up being kind of a mutual decision where the Tigers not pulled out necessarily, but that, he ended up making the decision that he felt was right for him. Now that obviously leads, with Bregman out, that kind of creates this second season in a row in which they've had this Frankenstein's monster third base platoon situation. Obviously last year with Gio, they brought in late, and Vierling and Ibanez, they played a lot of different guys there. I guess I asked Cody Stavenhagen this question even well before the Bregman saga ended about who was going to get the most reps at third base, and he said Vierling, and I would agree. I guess and he homered today, so I'll ask about him, but what do you think is the plan long-term right now for Jace Young? Because my perception of it is that 1 year of Glaber, and then assuming he hits, which is, TBD, Jace goes to second. But he's still, he's in his 20s. He's not exactly a super young prospect at this point. It is his rookie season. For 25, what do you think the plan is for him?
Yeah, for 25, I think the plan is for him to play third, and not only that, but be the primary guy if a righty is on the mound at third base. And I think that part of that is just situationally, you don't have too many other options that are major league ready at the moment. But I think it'll continue being. I like Frankenstein's monster. I think that's a good way to put it. I think that it'll probably look something similar to that. You want to know what's fucked up? Let's just be real here. Is that I genuinely, we could talk about Glaber, we could talk about Colt Keith. I genuinely think that the future of what second and third base look like relies on what the fuck Spencer Torkelson does, man.
I know, that was going to be my next question.
You can't escape it. You can't. It's every situation in the infield, sans shortstop, revolves around what you get out of him, dude. Like, if he figures it out and it's clicking, then there you go. And beyond, Torkelson's back at first base and Colt Keith's back at second base, and Jace Young hopefully can develop into being a solid third baseman. Maybe it's him and Vierling for the future. Maybe they go out and get somebody, whatever. And if not, then yeah, Jace Young's absolutely going to get reps at second base again a year from now. A year from today, we're going to be talking about how Jace Young was, a second baseman out of college and a second baseman at Tech, and was I think he win a minor league Gold Glove at second one of those years? Yeah, dude, like, which I don't think he deserved, but like either way, like he's clearly better there, especially with the arm that he has, which is not stellar. He's certainly going to be more valuable at second than he probably is, at least right now, and we'll see how development goes, than he is at third. So like it sucks. Like, I don't want to talk about Torque every day, dude. Like I don't, and I do. Like I have to, and I don't want to. And it's just so much of how this team looks like after this year revolves around what he turns into. Still 3 years in, we're still revolving a lot of these big picture decisions based on what he turns into.
Spencer Torkelson has surpassed Javi Baez as the most asked about Tiger on that I get questions about. I mean, we have the best pitcher in baseball, and the person I get the most questions about is Spencer Torkelson. And that kind of transitions into it because the announcement that was made when Colt Keith was going to be moving to first base, like, I think it was, okay, cool. Like, this makes sense. I didn't view him as a total liability at second. I just felt like his ceiling was that of an average defensive second baseman, meaning I think he'll transition to first. He'll be fine. But the one thing I've said all offseason, every throw that he made from second base last year could have gone into the fucking third row, and he's still playing second right now if Spencer Torkelson hits. Like, the reason for that I really think had less to do with his bat or what he can do and more so what Torque hasn't been able to do. So I think that creates something of an issue, and this is kind of about Torque, kind of not, but I think that for a team that's very young and prides themselves on their youth, I think that there's a real lack of athleticism around the diamond right now. And I've asked Cody about this and he brought it up, but I think between Jahen, Torque, Colt, potentially Jace, and Carey, you're looking at several guys who probably should be long-term DHs and are going to be playing the field most days, nine times out of 10. Is that an issue that you feel like can be addressed at some point this season, or is it just something they're going to have to ride with?
You know what's wild is I actually think of those names you mentioned, there's an argument that I'm trying to think of everybody you just said. There's an argument Kerry Carpenter is the best defender in that group, which is fucking wild. If you remember what the discourse around him was when he first got called up, dude, like how things change and whatnot. Yeah, absolutely, man. Like this is something that I've been talking about for probably a little over a year now, in the sense that not worded and articulated quite the same way, but like I've been wording it as there's just a lot of positionless guys in the system, and like that certainly is going to lead to a logjam somewhere. You're kind of seeing it right now. I just talked about this yesterday on Locked On Tigers, was like, there's this weird position battle going on right now that I genuinely think it is between Jahen and Torque. And I think that whoever hits lefties better, but like whoever hits better in the spring, I think is going to be that guy, because they want a righty that can hit lefties and that they can bring into the game and whatnot. And in a perfect world, they would take both of them up north in a heartbeat, but neither of them can play defense anywhere outside of first base. So like you can't. And I think that even like when Justice Bigbie 2 years ago was like raking in the minors, people were like, oh, like where's he going to play? We don't know. He doesn't really have a position. Like it just seems to be this reoccurring theme. And like ultimately pitching is so hard these days, where like if you can hit, you're going to play, man. And like, I know that like you have a similar philosophy there and understand that too. And it's just like, they'll find a way, but ultimately this team is clearly keen on like defense. And Harris made that a point for why he didn't call up Kerry Carpenter right away and why he didn't call up Jace Young right away. Like there's Colt Keith, like there's so many prospects that he waited to call up until they were debatably like over marinated because of struggles defensively, and now it's yeah, dude, and like that's why they signed Glaber, and that's it's so weird to talk about. Like they signed a second baseman to replace their like first baseman that was struggled last year,
right?
But, like, that's what happened, and you're gonna have moves like that as long as that continues being a thing. So I think that's why they wanted to go after Clark. I think that's why McGonigal's playing all over the infield. Right, he's playing second. He's still at short. He's playing third. I think that they want to, Rayner. I'm not sure Rayner's going to stick at shortstop, but the kid's big and an athlete. Like he'll play somewhere and not be a liability. Like I think that that's kind of why in the Harris era they're trying to go more toward youth and high school talent, but also athletes, people that play premier positions. They're not drafting a first baseman in the first round ever again, I don't think.
I would agree. I think part of it too. My theory on this is I actually think the new rules have impacted this a little bit as well, where there's more emphasis on speed and base running. Than like Max Clark, I think is going to be a significantly more valuable player in the modern age of baseball than he would have been, say, 2018 prior to the rule changes and everything. Yeah, it's bizarre. It almost reminds me, at least on the infield, and that's the bizarre part of the Dombrowski era, where it's like we would just get hitters. Like we didn't have
that short, baby.
Right, well, like we didn't have a position for Castellanos coming into 2014, so they were just like third. Fucking, I don't know, sure, why not? Like it was.
I mean, go no further than the Prince Miggy corner infield. Fuck me, man.
Yeah, where Miggy's just like, I'll move, fine, I'll play. And it's the youth thing is it's interesting because every infielder drafted out of high school as a shortstop. Like that's just a classic thing. And then you either stick there or you don't. I mean, I think the development of the bats is there. I think McGonigal is going to be wonderful, but it's bizarre because you have a great, potentially two great defensive catchers. You have a really solid defensive outfield. Green's excellent in left. Parker's excellent in center. Vierling or whoever's going to be right will be serviceable. And it's just this weird issue where you kind of look around the diamond. It's like their need for bats is apparent. And even if you fill those voids, it's like, he's got to, for a team that focuses on pitching so much, it is kind of bizarre. And I guess that's kind of where we'll transition to pitching. I think, and I could be wrong because the whole monitoring of innings and could be a part of this, but I feel like right now the rotation is as close to set in stone as we would think. I think obviously the big three, and I think Mize has emerged, and I would say Job at this point, probably with Maeda getting that long relief role, which I think he could. It's kind of a thankless job, but I think by his standards could thrive in it. That's a necessary role for every baseball team. But the question I've been asked that I actually haven't been able to really answer is, let's assume best case scenario, all these guys stay healthy and they're pitching decent, serviceable enough baseball, whatever it is, a month into the season. What do you do with Alex Cobb when he comes back?
Yeah, I think that is a great question. My solution is a really shitty one, and it's just like, I'm cursing up a storm, by the way. It's fine. Yeah, I can't curse on my own show, so I'm just letting it fly.
No, it's all good.
The Alex Cobb situation is interesting because, especially if Casey Mize looks how he did last Friday, you're not moving a soul out of that rotation. That is the rotation. The only one would be like if Mize, maybe that was more of a flash in the pan thing than a consistent thing, then maybe you have that. I think the only thing that I'm really able to say to that and say when people ask me about it is like, there's a 0% chance all five of these guys stay healthy this year, which is like super, like, again, super shitty.
It's true. It's true though. I mean,
it's not rocket science. It's not some great master strategy, but like Tarek Skubal, one healthy season. Reese Olson, 0 full seasons at the major league level. Jack Flaherty, you want to talk about the epitome of like getting hurt a lot in a major league career. Jackson Jobe is a literal rookie. He's not going to go 200 innings his first year in the majors. And then Casey Mize has, barely been healthy for his entire major league career as well. Like, there is literally no chance that those five guys all make 30 starts. So like he'll get in there at some point. Like, it's really my only kind of counter to it.
And that's why I think that's one thing that this organization has done over the last few years that we've never had is like, I don't know why it took us so long. The realization of like, guys get injured. You need depth. Yeah. Like, I think there is a place for, and this is what I've been saying. Maeda, all the M's, Maeda, Mize, like maybe Manning at some point. We'll ask about him, but like Montero, these guys are all going to get their reps in starting at some point this year. I think the one thing I will bring up with Cobb, and it's not even necessarily whether it's Cobb or whoever's healthy at the time. I do think at some point they will either do 6-man rotation or move somebody either from the bullpen to a starting role or maybe bring somebody up to skip Job starts in an attempt to monitor innings throughout the season. Because especially if he starts the year in the major league rotation, you want to have him down the stretch. I just brought up Matt Manning a second ago, who was, lit up in his 2 outings in spring. And you brought up the point of, there's only one option left with him at this point. AJ was talking about him the other day as if he still believes that he can help the team. I don't think there's been any discussion about him being a bullpen piece necessarily. Does he pitch here again?
I think that is a very real question, and I would put the odds of him getting traded before opening day this year at above zero. I wouldn't call it likely. I wouldn't say that, those trades are few and far between, especially with guys that do have a minor league option left, that they don't have to move him. But I think that is now like on the table really for the first time, ever, for Matt Manning specifically. Like it's unbelievably frustrating because you see glimpses all the time, and you see flashes of what the fastball can be. You see flashes of what the off speed can be. Last spring, I was convinced he figured it out. And that's why I'm like still kind of reserved about like what, Mize going forward. Like it's 1 3-inning outing against Toronto's bench players. Like I'm trying not to, overreact too much. And I totally already have, but it's one of those things with him where last year at this time, he debuted that like splitter changeup thing that he hadn't really thrown. And it was fantastic, and it was getting swing and miss. And I think back to when he was really young, like 18, 19, 20 years old in the low levels of the minors, and everybody thought he was, a bona fide ace in the making and whatever. And we heard two things about him when he was really young. And that was that he has an electric fastball that can get to mid, even upper 90s, and that he has a crazy good curveball. Neither of those things is true now. Yeah. And I'm just like, what the fuck happened, man? Like what happened in his development? I mean, there was some like drama and rumors. I want to say his last year in AAA when he had like a 7 ERA, where it was like, and AAA ERA is like whatever anyway, but like he had this weird thing where he tried to add a slider when he was already throwing a curveball, and then they like eventually he was just throwing like a sweeper slurve thing and didn't have either anymore, and they just like merged. And then the fastball, he can throw at 98, but he also will sit 92. Like he's so odd on the mound, man. And I'm rooting for him because again, we see the glimpses. Yeah. He's so his extension is so great, and the fastball, when located well, is legitimately like, I will still argue the potential to be an elite pitch. Mm-hmm. But like I don't know, man. Like to go back to your actual original question of will he pitch here again? I would say probably, if like he's on the 40 man, and again, like injuries happen, I would imagine so. But like I also think that they are. It would not shock me at all if he was moved here like this season.
It's very telling to me at this point when you talk about pitchability and really just overall potential, the guys who we a year or two ago we hadn't heard of, who I feel like have lapped him. Like you sent out a whole thing about, like, and I know he got rocked a little bit in his last outing, but the stuff Cater Montero's featuring, and that there's been an uptick in his fastball velo, and the fact that, he kind of gave him some very productive innings at points, big innings down the stretch a season ago. You look at guys like Herter, even Ty Madden. I know that he's injured right now. It's strange. Yeah. What's happened. I don't know if it's victim of overhype or if something just got lost in the translation. I think that this is sometimes, and I don't want to disparage anybody, but I do think this is sometimes the prospect or the problem with prospect rankings is that we grade these guys more as athletes than we do as baseball players. Because I feel like the appeal of Matt Manning probably exceeded what the actual value of Matt Manning was. Which
it's also why you don't build an entire fucking rebuild about starting pitching. But that's
obvious, right? We've had to learn that the hard way. But it's just like the idea of this tall, super athletic, hard throwing righty. I mean, it's weird because I think that was Avila's like first draft, but that's such a Dombrowski pick. Like that's such I like, give me the big tall righty. Right.
It actually wasn't an Avila pick. Avila was big on, give me a big school power throwing righty with a slider. Like that was his favorite thing.
Yeah. So that's kind of where we're at with the starting pitching. I think the bullpen obviously last year took on like this unbelievable, like crazy form where they were, you know, pitching chaos and the way they dominated. And the one thing I've said is like a few of those guys are going to like really struggle. I feel like at some point this year, we've already kind of seen it like with Herder struggling a little bit and Foley had a bad outing. But one thing I'm curious about, because AJ has thrived and I think like really takes pride in the fact that any one of these guys can be the closer, and that's worked over the last few years. Who do you think leads this team in saves in 2025?
Yeah, it's one of my favorite questions right now because I think that there is it's an AJ Hinch team, as you mentioned, right. But B, there are so many candidates, right? Like a lot of people immediately just go to Tyler Holton, and I think it's fair because he's been absolutely insane for 2 years now. I think that in a weird way, Tyler Holton is, this is going to sound weird, and it's not exactly how I mean it, but like he's too valuable to have as your closer.
Yeah, no, I agree.
That, like AJ wants to use Holton in any situation where there's a row of lefties coming up, or wants the opposing manager to go to his bench, or and Holton almost to 100 innings, dude. Like he's not going to be reserved to get the last 3 outs of the game, and Holton is almost like he's so good that it's just like you want to use him, from the 6th to the 8th, or from in the 7th and 8th or something like that, more so than anything else. I really think if I had to bet right now, I would put money on Canely. I don't know how confident I would be in that. The biggest issue I had with the bullpen last year, which certainly in that, in the miracle stretch and the pitching chaos stretch was pretty much non-existent. I didn't have any complaints with how the bullpen was there. But my biggest red flag with this pen is the fact that they didn't have a high strikeout guy. And like, that is why, in the same way that we talk about Torkelson on the offense, it's Alex Lang in the bullpen, man. Like, if he can throw a strike, he's the closer. Like, it's so easy. It's just like, yeah, like that's it. He's a maniac that throws insane stuff, some of the best stuff literally in the whole organization. And if he has any clue where it's going, he's going to have a 30% K rate and have 30 saves. But like, that's a huge question. So for now, and I don't think he's going to be ready by opening day anyway. So for now, I think it's Canely because he's the only one that doesn't allow hits and he gets strikeouts. The only Achilles heel is he gets walks, just not at the, Gregory Soto, Alex Lang rate.
Right.
He gets that's like his one kind of Achilles heel, but he still had a whip under 1, like doesn't allow base runners and gets a high amount of strikeouts. I think Bo Brisky's probably in that conversation for a similar reason, but he needs a slider. I still argue, but that's whatever. I love Bo Brisky. And I think that, he was featuring 100 in the ALD or in the wild card round or whatever. Like I think that if he's throwing like that, he could certainly be in the mix too. But the only thing I'm really confident in is that it's not Jason Foley anymore. That's really, and I love Foley, and I've had this conversation a lot on my show. It's like, I love the dude to death, but you need to give me swing and miss if you're a closer. And he had an ERA over 3, which like isn't bad, but like people were hitting him harder this past year, and he's been getting hit hard in spring training. I don't think he's it anymore.
I would agree. And I think that there's absolutely a role for Foley more in a limited middle relief or late relief, a role where you need, guys on base, he'd be perfect because you need right. Ground balls. He's going to get ground balls. It's just when you, as a reliever, and look, the ERA is great and ultimately getting outs is what matters. When the strikeout rate per 9 starts with a 6, it's like, right. Man, this is rough. And I want to go back to the Tyler Holton point that you made, because I went and I'm on Baseball Reference right now. The stretch that he had like for 3 months last year, which I would argue sounds like fucking Willie Hernandez might be the greatest stretch that any Tiger reliever has ever had. At 37 appearances, he pitched 52 2/3 innings, but he had 7 saves, 10 holds, 8 starts, and he also won 4 games. I think AJ loves that. I think AJ wants that Swiss Army knife in the pen. I think, and look, he will close games, but I just think that what they're able to get out of him in terms of value, the fact that he pitched, I think, every inning at some point. Like,
he was the first pitcher in like 100 years or whatever to close one game and then start the following game.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's
like, I think the versatility, AJ isn't going to let that go and pigeonhole him into just being, one inning reliever.
One guy you did not bring up that is actually, I saw something from him late last year that I think could carry over is Will Vest. Will Vest was, I think, the Tigers' most used reliever a year ago.
Yeah, that wouldn't surprise me.
And there was this point late in the year, and I remember it being most noticeable in game 1 of the wild card round, where, Skubal goes 6, and regardless of how good bullpens are, whenever you take a pitcher like Skubal out of the game, there is going to be this kind of contingency of like, all right, let's see what happens. And Vest came in and looked better than, there was a ride on his fastball that we hadn't seen his entire career. And I think that was really kind of a thing the last month of the season. If that's the version of him they get, I think that AJ's been so great, like playing, like easing guys into high leverage. I think they did that with him a year ago, and like pretty good strikeout rate, only 8.1 per 9. But this is where FIP and ERA were the exact same, 2.82.
Yeah.
Where so it's like that's an indicator that like he was executing his pitches. So yeah, I mean, I think that there's depth there. Canely, obviously, I think is a really good signing and very like low risk signing. I mean, you know what you're going to get with a guy like that. Let's we're talking about the pitching, but I brought him up a while ago, but let's go back to our dear friend at the shortstop position, Javi Baez. Spring training, darling, having a wonderful spring. It's so funny, man, because like Trey Sweeney is going to get, I think, a majority of the reps at short. And the question that I get 2 questions that I get asked about Javi. Number one is there any chance that he's like good again? And my answer is like, no, like not offensively. It's just, he was the worst hitter in baseball last year. But the follow-up question is there anything they can get out of him? Like, is there a role that he can fill where, yes, the contract's a disaster, like throw that out the window. Just look at him as an entity on this team. Can he be something as a platoon shortstop guy who hits lefties? Because, and he set his own expectations. In order for us to view him through a better lens than we already view him, he needs to put up better numbers than the worst offensive player in baseball. So like, that's not that hard, but I've kind of been under the belief that it's borrowed time. Do you think that there is still value just even in that platoon shortstop role with Javier Baez?
My opinion of this genuinely is it doesn't fucking matter what we think. They're going to find out.
Oh, like, yeah, right. No, I know.
You know what I mean? They are not going to just piss away that money. Like if there is any value to be had in him, whether it's super utility, doesn't get at bats, or whether it's starting shortstop every day, we're going to find out. And like, I do think that there is a reality in which he is able to be like the shortstop against lefty pitchers and can still play solid defense. The biggest concern I have right now about shortstop is actually more to do with the roster construction than it is even Javi. And that's I am not 100% certain that Trey Sweeney is making the team out of camp, and I think he absolutely should.
Huh, okay. Why do you think that?
Nothing to do with his ability. He's been solid in the spring, looks really good. I think actually as the spring has gone along, it's been more and more likely, which is a great thing. I want him to make the team out of camp 10 times out of 10. I think there is a reality, though, where they're carrying Javi, Zach McKinstry, Andy Ibanez, Jace Young, and then one of Justin Henry Malloy or Spencer Torkelson, and you go, oh shit, we don't have any more bench spots, and guess who has an option? The young player that only played half a season of Major League Baseball next year that we still think has room to grow anyway. why don't we just have Zach McKinstry if we really need somebody hitting at short? And like, that terrifies me. And I think that is a reality, and that a possibility rather. But I also then would argue that, to have an argument with myself, is like that if Sweeney makes the team, then you have Sweeney Baez, you have Glaber, who's only playing second and is not a platoon. You have Colt Keith, who's only playing first and is not a platoon. And then you have Ibanez and Jace Young, and then eventually Matt Vierling all at third. Zach McKinstry, unless he's going to get a ton of innings in corner outfield, which, by the way, all of your outfielders are already lefties anyway, right. There isn't necessarily a need for him either. So, like, I would vote for that. I would vote for Trey Sweeney, but I do think that this organization loves Zach McKinstry. They avoided arbitration with him again this past winter. I think there's a real, legitimate, tangible chance that that Trey Sweeney isn't even on the opening day roster, and that's going to kill me if that comes true.
It would piss off so many people too. Yeah. Well, man, that's a hell of a breakdown you just gave, because you perfectly explained their thought process behind this. And it's just going to be, and you brought it up a minute ago, like, it's just going to be the grind, the cross that they're going to have to bear with Hobby, where, like, and trust me, I'm sure you get it all the time. I get it all the time, where it's just like, why not just eat the money? And just one of those things you have to explain. They're just not gonna. It's just like asking, why isn't the sky, brown? It's not. It's just a thing it's just a thing that exists. Like, he's here. I do think there is a chance, because they do still have pride and they are trying to be competitive.
Right.
If he is worse, even in a platoon role, if he's that bad against lefties, where like he's ineffective regardless of what, platoon or position you put him in, that there's a chance he wouldn't make it through the season, and they do eat the money at some point. But they are going to work this pencil eraser down to the last nub until they are certain that there's no good baseball left in them. And it's been a very strange offseason, I feel like, in general, because I still think the biggest issue was not one that was addressed, which is, where's the thump, the power in the middle of your lineup coming from? Of course, going back to what you said at the beginning, what we said all offseason, which is that changes with Torque. Torque gives them, if there's a 35 homer season in Torque, then all of a sudden we're not even going to be thinking about who you could have signed. That's your fill-in right there. What's weird is I feel like this entire division, sans literally the worst team ever, is due for regression. Like, last year you had 3 teams from this division that made the playoffs, all 3 of them winning a playoff series. And right now I think the gambling favorite in most sports books is the Twins to win the Central, which I understand. I don't know how you feel about this. I feel like I am a believer in, like, culture and juju, and I don't feel great, or I wouldn't feel great betting on a team coming off of a historic collapse to go out and win the division the next year. Who do you think is the biggest competition in the Central right now for the Tigers?
It's a great question. The White Sox. No.
Yeah.
It's weird, because I think, like you said, I mean, you really are right in the sense that each team has a legitimate argument for regression this year. Cleveland lost offense.
Yes.
Are you shitting me? Like, that's the one thing they couldn't really afford to lose, and they lost it. But really, as long as Cleveland has J-Ram and pitching, I don't really give a shit. Like, I'm just going to assume they're going to be decent every year. So now, a win away from the 1 seed? Probably not. I think that's kind of safe, but, like, they'll be around, playing competitive baseball all year, I would imagine. The Twins, I don't know. Maybe it's just like the era that we're growing up in. I refuse to, like, completely buy in until they prove it to me, like, kind of thing. And like, they have the names, and they have probably a better roster than you on paper. Okay. But it seems like every year something happens, dude. Like, they either, do really well in the regular season, then get swept in the playoffs, or they have the collapse like they did, or everybody gets hurt because they've built their entire organization around, like, 3 of the most injury-prone players in baseball. Like, it's just there's always so much going on over there. I love the players on the Twins too. Like, I love Byron Buxton. He's one of my favorite players in the league. Like, they have so many. Joe Ryan is such an electric factory on the mound. Like, they have so many fun players on their team. That's not even to mention one of the most exciting closers like we've literally ever seen. Like they're awesome, and they just can't like glue it together. And so I don't know. Like I was not very big on the Twins last year whenever they re-signed Correa and everybody was like, oh, they should be the favorites. They had Correa the year before too and didn't win. Like, what are we talking about? They didn't actually get better. They just kept this guy who has not really performed up to contract anyway. The weirdest team to me though is the Royals, because they have like an 11-win player on their roster. And like, when you look at like their team, it's like, okay, so you're telling me that a year ago the Royals were a 75-win baseball team, but with Bobby Witt Jr. on it? Like, yeah. I know that that's not exactly, you know, how WAR works and whatnot. You can't just play that game necessarily, but like, that is the production they got from everybody else. They got little to no, and like Vinny's healthy this year, right? Like he's awesome. They have a lot of youth, especially coming up through the pitching.
Added Jonathan India too.
You're right. Jonathan India is a big add. Obviously Cole Reagans is awesome. Like they have good talent. I'm not trying to disrespect the Royals, but like it's just it's if they even have a decent supporting cast, they're gonna win fucking 90, dude.
I know.
Like they like legitimately like that is how good Bobby Witt Jr. is. But I still am not 100% sold that they have that supporting cast to be like, oh, this team's, you know, a 500 ball club without that guy at shortstop, and then they're adding him to it, kind of thing. So we'll see. I always just kind of defer to Cleveland just because, like, again, as long as they have J-Ram in pitching, they're always going to be competitive. But I think the Royals' floor is higher than a lot of people give them credit for, because like they're going to get 11 wins out of one player. That's tough to overcome in a negative way.
I would agree. The other thing I find very intriguing about the Royals is, last year, we're either going to find out if last year was fluky or if organizationally they're in a very good place, because they got great years from multiple starting pitchers.
Yeah.
And I mean,
Seth Lugo.
Right. That's the thing. Reagans is one thing because he's young and he's coming into his own. Seth Lugo was the most whatever guy, like who finishes second for the Cy Young. Like, is that just the baseball gods being kind to them, or is there a legitimate number two, really solid, starting pitcher there behind Reagans? And like they got, they re-signed Waka. Like they got good efforts from their veteran starters. And we've talked about it with Detroit of kind of these resurrection projects. If this new regime that they have is like that, then we could be talking about a completely different team. Yeah, no, it's interesting that I think you brought it up with the Twins. It's just that's their biggest problem is the core of their team, the heart of their team is three guys who are never healthy at the same time. I mean, Royce Lewis, Buxton, and Correa, three guys who are in very different parts of their careers. The one concern I think with Cleveland, and we saw it even in the postseason a year ago, is like last year they had, and I'm looking at it right now, they had four guys in their pen with a sub-2 ERA, one with a, obviously Clase with a sub-1 ERA. But when you look at it, they had five guys in that pen that appeared in 68 or more games, with four of them appearing in 74 or more.
They traded one of them and no one gives a shit. It's like,
right, exactly.
Like they still got four sub-2s. Like, who cares? You
do wonder about usage at that point. I do think that's a legit thing with pens. And I mean, like, Clase was awful in October, a year ago. It's like the more you see these guys, the more they have a tendency to wear down. So yeah, it's as much as I want to get on the Tigers for not really addressing the offense, their weakness is no bigger than any of the other weaknesses we point to with the other teams in this division. Like every team, I feel like there's something that's pretty glaring. And you even look across baseball right now. I mean, the Yankees just lost Garrett Cole. Like the American League, I think, is in a very weird place right now where it's for 7 years, for almost a decade, everything ran through Houston. Yep. And we're still trying to find who the next Houston is going to be, where it's like, who's the Goliath? And right now there isn't one, which I think makes this as open a division as we've seen in a long time. I guess I'll put you on the spot here, and I'm still deciding what my prediction is going to be, but where are you at roughly? Oh, it's just a rough estimate record-wise where this team finishes.
For sure. I think I always do an exact record for opening day. That's
Me
like
too.
my big thing is I write it down on my whiteboard, and I'm get it wrong by 10 games every year. But it's interesting because so in 2022 I had them I think over 500, which
No, I did too. I had them at 83. I remember, and they won.
yeah, I think I had them at 84 or something like that.
Yeah.
Complete train wreck.
Right.
2023, I had them very low. I think I had them below 70 wins. Like I had them like 60s. Like I was really low on that team. And obviously they exceeded that, almost made a run late and almost ended 500, whatever, 77 wins, whatever they ended at. And then this past year, I was actually like somewhat in the ballpark, and I had them like over 500 and being solid, but I had them just missing the playoffs, and obviously the miracle run, they kind of exceed that. I could really see it. Chris Brown of Tigers Minor League Report made a great point like a year ago, where he said that this team is full of either players that are hurt a lot in their career or are really young. And when projecting baseball players, those are the two most difficult groups to project, right? Like those are the two most difficult players to project production from. And the Tigers are still full of that a year later, and it still reigns true. So I want to give him credit there. But like, I think that there is no reason this team shouldn't be in the mid 80s, low 80s, an over 500 team again. Do I think that they're going to make the playoffs for the second year in a row? I don't know, man. They were almost 10 under 500 before they went on a historic run. Like, it's not like they were consistently an 86, whatever they ended at, win team throughout the entire season. Like they were the best team in baseball for 90 days. Like it's tough, but I think that the floor has been raised. And I think 100%. That if you get that kind of explosion year from Riley Green, if Parker Meadows is healthy and plays how he did in the second half, if you can keep the pitching intact and healthy, like this team should get better in starting pitching, especially in the second half of the year when they just didn't have any. They should get better in starting pitching. The bullpen should be similar. And their offense should be better. Does that mean they're going to be good, like top 10? No, but it's a low bar to be better. So, like, I think on paper, there's no reason that this team isn't playing a more consistent brand at a bare minimum. And like, okay, they're not winning 10 and then losing 7 and then winning 8 and then losing 12. Like, they're just, consistently playing competitive baseball in all of these series. And I think I'll probably have them going over 500. I'm just not quite sure how much over yet.
It's a very difficult team to predict, like you said, and the way you broke it down, I think is very, very smart. Where last year I predicted 85 and they won 86, and even I couldn't really do much of a victory lap because I'm like, yes, and I also predicted 38-11 or whatever. Like it was just got it. That was a 70-something win team until the last month and a half, 2 months, and that was great. It's an interesting thing because I think that they could be a better team and will be a better team this year, but maybe not finish with a better record. Just because I think when you look at the way that streak went down the stretch, I've been talking about it a lot with Michigan basketball lately, like run differential and point differential, depending on the sport, is a real thing because coin flip games are exactly that. And sometimes you can have a season where you win 1,000,000 coin flip games and you end up locking up a bunch of one-run games and you win by, like Cleveland did it last year with the bullpen they had. And then there's times where the scales tip in the other direction.
Do you hear that?
No, what is it?
There is a giant truck right outside my window and I can't hear. Okay, wait. Okay, we're good. I can hear again, dude. That was insane. Anyway,
no, I didn't. I didn't hear it on my end, so maybe other people pick it up. But it's sometimes the scales tip in the other direction. So I think they did roster wise get better, and that's not just the young guys that I think are gonna improve. I think adding Glaber helps. I think the pitching that they've added helps. It's just. We literally saw two different versions of this team last year. The one that we saw through 70% of the season and the one that was, like you said, the best team in baseball for 90 days. which version do we get, or which version do we get that's closer to one of those teams? I don't know. We're gonna find out, but it should be, at least it's fun. And I agree. I think, knock on wood a million times, I think the days of 10 back on Memorial Day, I think is, for the time being, is done.
Right.
I think, I know the pitching has never really been a glaring weakness at any point, but it's so good now that they're gonna be able to steal games consistently 3-2, 2-1. I mean, and then you saw it at points, last year where they just kept it close and then they would get the big hit late. So look, this is I can't believe I'm saying this in time. I'm getting old as fuck. You've been doing this. You've been on Locked On for like 4 years now, because that was when, or Tigers, at least Locked On Tigers. So, and we've known each other. We've known of each other. We met for the first time in 2017 when we were both at Central Michigan.
Yeah, I'm right. I was a sophomore.
Yeah, I was something. I was by definition a student. I don't know, but obviously. Yeah, right. Yes. Obviously, we've circled back around and we've kept in touch for a long time. But no, dude, it's been awesome to see what you do and how hard you worked for this. And it's no, I mean, you've absolutely become one of the names in the Tigers social media community that we go to for this stuff. So, and look, having done the Locked On thing, it is not easy. For people who don't know, Locked On is a Monday through Friday podcast based around each major team has one affiliate. You're the Tigers affiliate, and you also do Locked On Red Wings. And like, you're probably you definitely are in a better place with it now. I'm still not saying it's easy, but bro, during like the COVID year transitioning into 2021, when I had to fill 30 minutes and it's just like, I don't know, maybe we trade for this guy. Here's like, it was, go ahead.
You had the COVID year, and then you handed it off to me for the lockout. And
that's right.
That was like my first winter, my first off season was lockout. And we got a memo that we weren't allowed to talk about the players. So I was like, all right, dude. So I literally I'm sure they're still up. That was before we were even on YouTube. That was like audio only. I just did like the top 5 players of all time at every Tigers position, and I just didn't use any active players. And I was like, we'll just, roll with that, I guess. And that filled, 2 weeks or whatever. And then I had to scrape the bottom of the barrel again. Yeah, there's definitely some, you learn to be creative. I can say that for sure.
For sure. Well, appreciate it as always, buddy. We'll keep in touch. We'll catch a game or run into each other at some point this year. So don't be a stranger.
Dude, we ran into each other on the street of a Lions playoff.
Yeah, after they beat the Bucks, I think. I think it was it was either Bucks or the Rams. I mean, they've only won 2 playoff games.
Right. Yeah. True. Fair point. So my apartment is downtown now, and so I was walking with my roommate to the Lions game ended, and then the Red Wings game dropped puck right after. Yeah. And so we had a watch party at my apartment, and we had a bunch of like our friends and stuff over. And then after that game, we put our Wings jerseys on and started hightailing it to Little Caesars. Yeah. And I think Austin was with you too. Mm-hmm. And I saw you guys on the road, and I was like, Kev, is that Castellani? Is that Chris? And he's like, I don't even know who you're looking at. There's a billion people here. And I'm like, fair enough. And I just started shouting Chris, and then you turned, and I was like, oh yeah, shit. Yeah. But yeah, it's funny, the accidental run-ins we've had are almost more, well, especially at Comerica, almost more frequent.
Yeah. Well, here's to many more, buddy. And I appreciate you joining the program, and we'll make sure to plug all your socials and everything. And
awesome.
Yeah, we'll talk in real soon. Thanks.
Awesome. Buddy. Yeah, I appreciate coming on here. Obviously appreciate everything you've helped me through in my career and everything as well. Like you recommended me for the Locked On Tigers gig. So I have you to thank for that. And yeah, man, of course we'll keep in touch, and yeah, we'll touch base plenty, I'm sure, during the regular season and whatnot.
For sure. All right. Appreciate you. That was great, man. It was one of those interviews where like you just kind of forget that you're recording for a while, because Scott and I have had these conversations off and on for years, and sometimes they're being recorded, sometimes they aren't. Shout out to the Discord crew that we used to have, that we used to just talk sports with forever back. And I know you don't know when the good old days are over, because those were very fun times. I'm proud of what he's done and what he's kind of continued to grow there with Locked On Tigers. Like I said, that is not a particularly easy gig. You got to be very creative. He's knowledgeable as hell about this team. And I don't know, I bring it up all the time about the communal experience, but having gotten to know not just fans, but like members of the media as well, it's a hard thing to do to cover the team when they're bad. And right now, like, I'm not saying they're going to go out and win 95 games, but the fact that they're competitive and there's some hope is to see like the optimism, not just coming from the fans, but also from the media, is very cool. So appreciate Scotty jumping on, and you can follow him. We'll link to all his socials and everything down below, so you can make sure to show him some love. CastellaniContent.com. There you'll find all our content at Castellani 2014 on Twitter or X. What's the other? Oh, YouTube, like, subscribe. You can also find us in podcast audio form on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. It looks like, I'm trying to map this out. It looks like next week, Tony Garcia will be another repeat guest for us. We had him on during football season. He does a wonderful job covering Michigan football and basketball for the Detroit Free Press. He will be back at some point next week after Michigan's tournament matchup has been announced. Yes, despite how they've played over the last month, they will be a tournament team. So we're going to kind of recap the season, ask him what the first year under Dusty May has been like, and kind of talk about what the future might look like for them in the NCAA tournament. So we're kind of mixing things up as we get closer to baseball season. I will say just one kind of final programming note. I had a conversation with Austin, who I think is currently working on a vlog that we did at Breslin Center last weekend. And I think in the summer months, like during baseball season, we're going to try to mix it up a little bit in terms of the guests that we bring on. Don't get me wrong. I've had a blast talking to the Detroit people that we talk to, but as much as I love baseball, during baseball season, you guys get 162 post-game recaps. You get I'll Say This podcast. You get a lot of baseball stuff. And I just feel like in a way you'd almost bore or isolate the offense, isolate your audience to a point where you're doing the same thing every week. So I feel like those summer months is going to be kind of an opportunity for us to branch out with guests, maybe bring in some stuff that you haven't seen, non-Detroit people. You look at in the past, we've had comedians on, we've had, social media personalities on. So just something that you guys can look forward to as we continue to try to grow the brand and grow this show. Really appreciate all the support. I think we have a good momentum going right now, and hopefully that continues with this episode. So shout out again to Scott Bentley. We'll be back next week with another episode of I'll Say This. We will be back with another episode of Chris Company. I'll talk to you real soon. Have a great rest of your day. Peace and happiness.
It's an unfair game. We got to think differently.